Okay, so let's talk about oxygen debt. During rest or moderate activity, like I'm just chilling right here, I have enough oxygen available to support my aerobic respiration, right? Oxygen deficiency may develop during 1 to 2 minutes of strenuous exercise. So let's say I go bam, 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 real quick, just run 50 yards, or quick energy. Well, in this case, what's going to happen is we want to go from maybe aerobic and use anaerobic and use glycolysis, but pyruvic acid forms and accumulates as an end product of anaerobic respiration in the form of lactate. You know lactate. Okay, lactate diffuses out of the muscle cell and is carried in the bloodstream to the liver. Using ATP, liver cells convert lactate back into glucose. But during strenuous exercise, oxygen is used to produce ATP for muscle contraction rather than converting lactate back to glucose. So we're using too much oxygen, right? As that lactate builds up, the oxygen debt develops and must be repaid, meaning we're using more oxygen than we're making during intense exercise. We'll start running out of oxygen and these byproducts will accumulate, which is lactate. Now, a lot of times, sometimes people think it's that sharp pain that we get from that. That could be one of the causes, but that could also be, the accumulation of lactate, maybe some micro trauma, other things like that. So it's not always that sharp, excruciating pain that you get, but it could be because oxygen debt in general can take several hours to get better, and that sharp pain usually subsides rather quickly. So oxygen debt refers to the amount of oxygen that liver cells require to convert the accumulated lactate back into glucose, plus the amount that the muscle cells need to resynthesize ATP and creatine phosphate to their original concentrations. So oxygen debt is also called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Again, you're using more oxygen than you're making due to intense exercise, which can lead to debt. And in order to repay that debt, it can take several hours. Physical training, as you train, of course the body increases the muscle's capacity to move energy production and you become more efficient. So you won't go into oxygen debt as quickly. Okay, so training helps with that. So less than half of energy released in reactions of cellular respiration is used to form ATP. The rest becomes heat. Okay, this heat is carried by the blood to other tissues and helps maintain body temperature. When a muscle loses its ability to contract during strenuous exercise, it is referred to as fatigue. So you muscles fatigue. Muscle fatigue may arise from electrolyte imbalances or decreased ATP levels. A decrease in pH due to lactate accumulation may have a role in muscle fatigue. A muscle cramp, a sustained, painful, involuntary contraction thought to occur due to changes in the extracellular fluid around the muscle fibers, leading to uncontrolled muscle fiber stimulation by its motor neurons. So a lot of times people ask, hey, well, what causes that muscle cramp? I mean, there's a lot of factors. It could be electrolyte imbalance, not enough water, too much water, lack of too much exercise. So it's hard to say that one thing can cause muscle cramps, and people vary. Right? One thing to get rid of it is time, stretching. So everyone has their own little techniques to get rid of it, but what may work for one person may not necessarily work for someone else. Now we talk about the different muscle fibers. You've heard of slow and fast twitch muscle fibers, right? So fast twitch fibers make up majority of muscle fibers. Rapid movements reach maximum force quickly, but they fatigue quickly. They are large diameter. They have very few mitochondria. They store glycogen and anaerobic metabolism. They're good for powerful contractions, but best for short-term activities, 50 yards, 100 yards, etc. Our slow twitch fibers or slow fibers have a small diameter, takes long to reach the peak tension, but they're very resistant to fatigue. I can run on these for hours, so provide prolonged contraction. So these are our endurance athletes. Fast fibers, fast twitch, these are Usain Bolt, and then slow fibers are 10K, 15K athletes. Now you have slow oxidative, which are slow twitch, red, type 1 fibers, and you have fast glycolytic, fast twitch, they're usually white, type 2 fibers. Again, slow twitch use aerobic ATP production, fast glycolytic are anaerobic. Slow oxidative or abundant mitochondria, myoglobin, capillaries, low levels of glycogen, resistant to fatigue. Whereas our fast glycolytic, they have abundant glycogen, fatigue quickly, modest quantities of mitochondria, and predominant in quick response muscles such as our gastroc. Our slow twitch are more soleus. When you work out, you get something we call hypertrophy, which is enlargement of muscle due to repeated exercise. If I keep doing the same bicep curls, my biceps will grow. If I don't use it, we call that atrophy. So if you don't use it, you lose it. Decrease in muscle size and strength. Type of exercise determines the response of the muscle. If I have low intensity exercises, causes slow fibers to increase mitochondria and capillaries. They become more fatigue resistant but maintain size. If I use forceful exercise, it causes that fast fibers to increase numbers of actin and myosin filaments, which enlarges fibers and entire muscle. So it depends on the type of exercise. If I train to be an endurance athlete, I'm going to be an endurance athlete. If I train to be quick, then I'm going to be a quick athlete. So it really depends. You can train your body to be one way or the other. Now remember, you are born with this certain amount of slow twitch and a certain amount of fast twitch fibers. So long distance runners can't all of a sudden become fast, and like Usain Bolt can't all of a sudden become long distance runners. You're born with that ratio, and it's up to your parents. So I did track, and I was good at long jump, oh gosh, long jump, triple jump, high jump, but the short events. If the coach put me into a long distance, I suck. I'd come in last because I knew my limitations, right? So you know your sport, you know what you're good at, and you know what you're not good at. So number of skeletal muscle fibers does not change with hypertrophy or atrophy. Okay, they just increase or decrease in size. One method of studying muscle function is to remove a single muscle fiber and connect it to a device that records its response to electrical stimulation. Isolated muscle fibers in a lab can be exposed to stimuli of various strengths. Fibers will be unresponsive until the threshold stimulus is reached. We call this the all or none. The minimum strength of stimulus required to generate an impulse through the muscle fiber, release calcium ions, activate cross bridges, and contract the muscle. In the body, one motor neuron impulse releases sufficient acetylcholine in the neuromuscular junction to bring muscle fibers to its threshold. Okay, remember when we talked about muscle contraction, the brain sends a signal. It releases acetylcholine, and when it reads acetylcholine, it goes to the transverse tubules, releases the calcium. Calcium goes, picks up troponin, moves tropomyosin out of the way, and then actin and myosin combine. Well, we need that minimum threshold for one motor neuron to release sufficient acetylcholine first, right? The response of a single motor fiber to a single pulse is referred to as twitch. You know those little twitches, not what you play video games on, but a twitch consists of a cycle of contraction and relaxation. Twitch, twitch. Sometimes you can see muscles twitch. A myogram is the recording of an electrically stimulated muscle contraction. The latent period is a brief delay between the stimulation and beginning of the contraction. The latent period is followed by a period of contraction and a period of relaxation. When a muscle fiber contracts, it contracts to its full extent, with each twitch generating the same force. This is called all or none response. So a perfect example is if you've ever fired a gun, right? It has a trigger. Now, depending on what that threshold is to pull that trigger, but once you pull enough force on that trigger, the bullet leaves the chamber, right? So same thing with muscle contraction. I need to get it to the point where it's going to get to that threshold. But once it reaches the threshold, no matter how hard or hard push, it's going to fire, all or none, right? So same thing with the gun. It's got to get enough threshold to pull the trigger. And it depends on, doesn't matter how slow or how fast, but once I get that threshold, boom, it's going to fire. So muscles work the same way. So here it is, right? The force of contraction, and then boom, and then it's relax. So it contracts and then relax. And there's this latent period, meaning there has to be a contraction and relaxation. And there's that latent period here. Athletes have learned to decrease that latent period so they can go boom, 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 and be a lot faster. If you're untrained, well, you contract, relax, and then your latent period might be a little bit longer, so you're not as fast as the Olympic athlete. Right? A muscle fiber receiving a series of stimuli of increasing frequency reaches a point when it is unable to relax completely and the force of individual twitches combine. That's the process of summation. Summation allows for a greater force of contraction than a single twitch can, right? So instead of one little muscle fiber contracting, we recruit a whole bunch. When exposed to a higher frequency of stimulation, relaxation time becomes very short. This is called partial tetany. If the frequency of stimulation is too high and the sustained contraction lacks any relaxation, it's called complete tetanic contraction. So you can get a muscle just stuck like that. Okay, partial tetany occurs in the body, but complete tetany can only be accomplished in the lab. You can only do that with like forced electrical stimulation, right? So here is twitch, summation, and tetany. So here's a twitch, doot, 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 doot. If we combine these together, then we can get a better contraction. So here's summation, right? Take a few of these twitches and summate and get a forceful contraction. But if we take a whole bunch of, and we just keep going, keep going, keep going, and then we can get tetany. And that can actually damage the muscle. Okay? So complete tetany, again, you can only do that in the lab. The body knows it won't contract as much to damage the muscle. The brain is smart enough that it won't allow it to do that. So a motor neuron and the muscle fibers it controls make up a motor unit. When stimulated, the muscle fibers of the motor unit contract all at once. An increase in the number of activated motor units within a muscle at higher intensities of stimulation is called a motor unit recruitment. Recruitment causes an increase in the strength of contraction. A muscle achieves maximum tension when all of its motor units have been recruited. So here's a motor neuron unit, and so these will contract. So again, a motor neuron and the muscle fibers it controls, okay, makes up a motor unit. So motor neuron and the muscle fibers it controls is motor unit. Sustained contraction of muscles allows for performance of daily activities, and muscle tone is a continuous state of sustained contraction of a few motor units at a time within a muscle, even when at rest. So if you just hold your hand up here, you've got some tone there, right? You've got muscle tone. Sometimes kids with cerebral palsy, or we call them floppy babies, right? They have hypotonia, so they're just floppy. Sometimes we have certain individuals with hypertonia. They're always relaxed. So right now, with a neurologically intact person, such as yourself, you have a good muscle tone. Okay, not too much, not too little. It's good. All right, so let's put it all together, because sometimes you're like, oh, Patel, you just read through the slide, and I'm like, I'm confused. Give me more. Okay, I'll give you more. So let's look at twitch. A twitch is a quick, involuntary muscle contraction. It happens when a single nerve cell sends a signal to a muscle fiber, causing it to contract briefly. Twitch, 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 twitch. Real life examples: imagine a sprinter getting ready to start a race. Just before starting the gun goes off, their lung muscles might twitch as they prepare to explode out of the starting blocks. Okay. Summation refers to the process where multiple muscle twitches add up or combine to produce stronger muscle contractions. This happens when nerve signals are present to the muscle fibers in rapid succession. Well, how do we real life? In weightlifting, when a lifter is trying to lift a heavy barbell, they may use summation to generate more force. Instead of lifting the barbell with a single quick jerk, they'll exert steady, increasing force to allow the muscles twitches to add up, making it easier to lift the weight. Right? Partial tetany occurs when the frequency of nerve signals to a muscle increases, causing the muscle to contract more frequently and with greater strength. However, the muscle still relaxes between contractions. So real life partial tetany in gymnastics, during a routine on the parallel bars, a gymnast might need to hold their body in a series of static positions. They use partial tetany to contract their muscles slightly to maintain balance and control while performing these static holds. So the rings in Olympics, that's a good example of partial tetany. Parallel bars is a good example of partial tetany. Now, tetany is a condition where muscle remains in a state of continuous contraction due to sustained nerve signals. In tetany, the muscle doesn't have time to relax between contractions. This can lead to muscle cramps and spasms. Imagine a marathon runner who pushes themselves to the limit and doesn't give their leg muscles a chance to recover during the race. They might experience tetany in their leg muscles, causing painful cramps and making it difficult to continue running. So that is muscle cramps 101, tetany. Now, there are different types of muscle contractions. There's isotonic, same tension contraction. There's isometric, same measurement contraction. So in isometric, I'm pushing against here. This is an isometric contraction. In isotonic, we actually have movement. So if I shorten this, this is called a concentric contraction. And a negative, when I release, that's called an eccentric contraction. Those are two still isotonic contractions. Isometric is when I'm just pushing into it. Here, involves force generation without shortening. So the muscle doesn't change length. Force is used to resist overstretching and opposite gravity. So it's just holding a weight in one position. That's an isometric contraction. Isotonic, I have a concentric, which is a shortening phase, and eccentric, which is a lengthening phase. Now, smooth muscle. Now, we talked mostly about skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle is found mostly in the GI tract, are elongated with taper ends. They don't have the striation, so they don't have the carne asada look, and have a relatively undeveloped sarcoplasmic reticulum. They contain thick and thin filaments, but they are arranged more randomly. Types of smooth muscle. In multi-unit smooth muscle, such as blood vessels and iris of the eye, fibers occur separately rather than as sheets, stimulated by neurons and some hormones. Visceral, which is like your gut, occurs in sheets and is found in the walls of hollow organs. These fibers can stimulate one another and display rhythmicity. These features accomplish peristalsis. Peristalsis is like if I was eating something and then the food just goes down, boom, 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 boom. So you get these contractions. It'll send that food to your stomach without you having to think about it. Remember, smooth muscle is involuntary. You don't have to think about it, whereas skeletal muscle is voluntary. So what's the similarities of smooth muscle and skeletal muscle? Well, both types involve reaction between actin and myosin. Both types are stimulated by membrane impulses, require an increase in calcium ions in the cells, and use ATP energy. So your gut and your skeletal muscles, they still need ATP. But the difference from skeletal muscle contraction is both acetylcholine and norepinephrine stimulate and inhibit smooth muscle contraction, while only acetylcholine stimulates skeletal muscle. So the two neurotransmitters in smooth muscle are acetylcholine and norepinephrine, whereas in skeletal muscle, ACH stimulates skeletal muscle. So that's the neurotransmitter is different. Hormones can stimulate or inhibit contraction of smooth muscle, but hormones can't control our biceps. But hormones can control our GI, think stomach, small intestine. Smooth muscle is slower to contract and relax. Smooth muscle contains a contraction longer with the same amount of ATP. And smooth muscle can change length without change in tautness. So those are some differences between smooth muscle and skeletal muscle. Now, cardiac muscle, which is found in the heart, is only found in the heart. Cardiac muscle consists of branching striated cells that interconnect in three-dimensional networks. The mechanism of contraction in cardiac muscle is essentially the same as that for skeletal and smooth muscle, but with some differences. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is not well developed, does not store much calcium. The transverse tubules supply extra calcium from extracellular fluid, so cardiac muscle cells twitches last longer. Cardiac muscle is self-exciting and rhythmic, creating a pattern of contraction and relaxation through something we call the pacemaker. And complex membrane junctions called intercalated discs join cells and transmit the force of contraction from one cell to another. So intercalated discs is kind of the key feature of cardiac muscle, and it allows the cells to communicate from one to another. And again, remember, the heart beats on its own, creating a pattern of contraction and relaxation through the SA node, which is the pacemaker of your cell. And of course, when we do the heart, we'll go a little bit more detail into that. Okay, so just to kind of summarize, where's the major location of skeletal muscle? Skeletal muscles. Where's the major location of smooth? In the walls of hollow viscera. Think, stomach, intestines, and some blood vessels. And cardiac, of course, is found in the heart. What's the major function of skeletal muscle? Movement of bones. What's the function of smooth muscle? Movement of viscera, peristalsis, and vasoconstriction. And the function of cardiac is to pump your heart. Remember, skeletal and cardiac are striated. Smooth is smooth, no striations. There are a lot of nuclei in skeletal. There's only one. You only see single nuclei in cardiac and smooth. In skeletal muscle, we have well-developed transverse tubules. Smooth muscle doesn't have transverse tubules, and cardiac have well-developed transverse tubules. They have intercalated discs. Okay, how do we contract them? Skeletal, voluntary, smooth, involuntary, and cardiac is involuntary. Sorry, it says voluntary. That should be voluntary. It happens. Autocorrect. Sorry. Contraction characteristics: contracts and relaxes rapidly when stimulated. Smooth contracts and relaxes slowly. And cardiac network of cells contract as a unit, self-exciting. It's very rhythmic, right? 60 to 100 beats per minute. Our smooth muscle is self-exciting, but it's slow. And then skeletal is voluntary and contracts and relaxes rapidly. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, hopefully that helps with that section.